Nicole, why don't you get us started?
All right. I want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us this evening. We've got some great information that we're going to be relaying to you guys. This is just part of our series in the legislative forum. We will keep you posted with more updates when we schedule more. And if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll be able to see this presentation and others that we've had already. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Pat, our board president, and let him introduce.
Thank you, Nicole. And as Nicole mentioned, welcome to our second in a series of forums with our state legislative delegation. We're very pleased to have with us this evening the representative from the 62nd Assembly District, Robert Wittke. We appreciate him making time available for us during Mental Health Awareness Month and also during a very busy legislative session. And we'll be trying to get his perspective on a number of issues that the state legislature is addressing now and over the next number of months. So we'd like to start, Representative Wittke, with a brief introduction. If you could tell us a little bit about your background and the role you're currently playing in the state legislature and a basic area that your assembly district covers. Then we'll kind of delve into some different issues that affect people living with mental illness and their loved ones.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Nicole. And thanks to everyone that's watching tonight. I really appreciate you allowing me to come on and interact with you. And I also would like to thank all of you that are part of this organization. I think that does some really great work in the community to help those that are truly in need. And so a little bit about, first of all, my district has parts of the city of Racine. It runs through North Bay, Wind Point, Caledonia, and then it cuts across Raymond and the town of Norway and ends up about where Wind Lake is, about on Highway 164. And I come down to probably about Highway K across. And so I'm part of, here in the legislature, there's 99 assembly seats. I'm in my second term of representing the 62nd district. And the reason that's important is because there are 33 senators and there are 3 assembly reps that are under each Senate district. And I'm part of Senator Weingardt's Senate district. So the reason that that's important is because we normally work fairly closely together on a number of a variety of subjects. Currently, what I have going this session is, first of all, I was at the start of the session, I was named to the Speaker's Task Force on Racial Disparities. And so I, along with Representative Haywood from Milwaukee, we co-chair the Education and Economic Development Subcommittee of that task force. And there's only 2 of us. The remainder of that task force is made up of community members. And so we will be coming out probably within the next month or so with some recommendations of some things that we've gone through on the education and economic development side. I'm vice chair again of the Ways and Means Committee. The Ways and Means Committee primarily focuses on how do we raise revenue to pay for everything that the state is responsible for. And then I'm also continuing on K through 12 education, colleges and universities. I now chair jobs in the economy, and then I was appointed to the Building Commission. So the more that you're up here, the more that you have the privilege to serve, the more that you can see that you can do things, the more that you try to get involved. And I would say that you're absolutely right. This is the busiest time that we have because we're in the early stages of the budget cycle. The governor's delivered his budget to us, and now we are evaluating that and moving forward with the budget process, which we anticipate will be done on time, probably around the end of June, first part of July, which is by statute where we have to be. So the other, I think I'll just point out one thing as well. One of the things I don't think that's, we come on these forums, we listen to your feedback. And it's all well and good that we come on during Mental Health Awareness Month and take the photo ops when we go different places. But I think if you really want to find out what we do and what we support, you'll start to observe what we do in our district. Do we really get down and take a look at, go to different places, try to understand what the needs are. And then also, if you follow along in the committees and so on that we have, do we actually advocate for what we want when, most of the things are publicly done. But I think I learned in my first term that if you're going to be successful here, and you're going to last a while, that you have to be committed and you can do good things. And so with that, I'll just go into whatever questions you have and try to give you the best perspective that I've got from my seat.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate the introduction and background. And you also served on the Racine Unified School Board at one time, isn't that correct?
Yeah, I was president. I was president for 2 years, and that seems like a long time ago. But it has helped shape some things that I see here, especially in this area.
And we'll definitely revisit that. Let's start maybe at a higher level, given that this is a budget session. From your perspective, are there any key mental health priorities that you'd like to see addressed in the state budget that's ultimately adopted this summer?
Yes. So there are a couple of really different factors that are influencing this budget cycle. The biggest one is the federal government printing money faster than I think anyone can spend it. And the flood of federal money and the fact that it's a piece of the puzzle that we don't have at this point in time a large amount of input on. At least I think we're starting to see some things coming together where we're going to start talking about where the governor is going to put some of that money. Plus the fact is that I was just in a joint committee hearing where we talked about where all the education funding is going to go as well. So one of the primary things that we really need to understand is where the federal money is going, what it can be spent for, and realizing it's one-time money. Make sure that we position state resources to get the most bang for the dollar. Now, if you follow along in some of the things that I've said in the education committee, I believe that the virus, I saw an article, I think that was very telling, and it mocked from the movie Titanic. It shows a ship heading straight on, two people looking over the deck, and at the point is an iceberg, and it says COVID-19. And down below, stretching out at the size of an iceberg, is everything else that's below it. And the things that we aren't talking about, all the other health issues that probably have gone unchecked in a number of different cases. I think one of the primary things that we have to start realizing is that mental health is going to be a very critical thing we're going to have to address. And why that's so critical is because the budget is like trying to steer the Titanic. It doesn't just turn on a dime. And so whenever we look to invest resources, there's only so much money that goes around. And so like one of the things that I've learned is that you have to start setting a foundation. So if we have programs in place that in the budget, and there are some that we will continue to discuss and look at, I would like to see us continue to make investments and increase those investments so that we start putting into place mental health resources that I think are going to be sorely needed. And I try to emphasize to people, I don't know if there's a time in my lifetime, there was I think back probably about last June, there was an article that came out, or there was a news story that came out about a 10-year-old girl that from Baraboo, Wisconsin, that walked out one night and took her own life. And I don't think I had ever seen a major news story with someone that young that was in that much despair. And I only believe by the way that we've gone through this over the last year, how much that we're going to have to make sure we set a foundation and continue to provide the resources that we need to address the issues that I think we're going to see across the board. But so to answer your question simply, the programs that we have, I would like to see in the budget, and there are some. There are grants to schools, there are grants to different other aspects for suicide prevention. There are other things to reimburse districts for mental health resources. But also what I look for is that organizations like yourself, if you believe there's an investment we should make, we ask that you send, provide us that information now, because we start to make what we call budget motions, which are these are what we're recommending that we invest in.
Appreciate that. I know one area, and I know we've discussed this before, is our public education program, Ending the Silence, which is targeted toward young people, reducing stigma, and giving young people the information they need so they can access necessary services as needed. So that's certainly an area that we're interested in partnering, certainly with school districts throughout Racine County, but we believe that's a very important model to replicate, statewide, in terms of that very critical awareness and education piece in the schools. You mentioned some of the grant programs and other initiatives. Would these be focused on providing more mental health services in the schools, or any particular targeted efforts that would result from these focused investments, or what's your thought on that?
Well, so many times we look at either what was in the budget the previous year, okay, and I do know that there were some programs that schools could, like what we call grant programs, targeted funding, which we call categorical aids, which would provide for more reimbursement for things like psychologists and so on. So I just was in Racine Monday, and we gave some awards to a couple of the schools that have Gilmore and Gifford that have real good groups of counselors that were recognized for their operation. And I know that that's kind of like the one good thing about going out and meeting different areas is you can listen to firsthand what they think. And so I'll be following up with some of the conversations that we had there. So one of the things that I've learned by being in the district, and also by being here, because we have a lot of my colleagues are from rural districts and so on that can't afford the things that even we have in our own urban community, that we just take for granted, and they have similar issues. And so what you find is that you can't just say, I want a psychologist at every school. I want a counselor at every school. I want a social worker. It doesn't work that way. And so you have to listen to those that actually do the work to try to find out, what's the best mix. What I was talking to a couple of people that on Monday, and they had recommendations to say, here's where I would invest in the school area to help us address things we think are coming up. The other thing that I look at is that, probably contrary to what some people believe, we actually do look for things that, the budget that the governor provides us, we do look for areas where we have common ground. And so, for example, there are some, he's got some funding in there for some phone line support for things like certified peer support specialists. We'll be taking a look at, do we continue on with some of those programs? We've got one of the other pieces that's in here is telehealth, that when we ended the session last time, in response to some of the things that we agreed had to happen at the start of the health emergency, was to put laws into place that would allow for that to happen. We are one of the states that needs to fortify that, and I know that there's been legislation circled around. Now, one of the things that I think is critical to understand is that the way that we'll work the budget process is that we will take, we will take all policy items that we have identified, and we'll take them out of the budget, and then we'll look to put them in separate legislation to pass forward so that we can get the proper cycle through it. The budget will be a document that tells us what we can spend and how we approach it. But I know telehealth is high on our list of things to do, as well as expanding broadband. We've made a number of attempts to say that we should have federal money. We're willing to invest state funds as well. We need to expand things like broadband so that you can provide those services across the board in our state. And so I think it's going to come down to what do we believe is going to work, and what do we continue to expand, and what resources can we do to do that. There's a new well, I'll let you go from there, because otherwise I could keep going on, but go ahead.
Yeah, actually, you kind of moved us into another topic of great interest, which is ways that we can kind of grow the mental health workforce and diversify the range and services available to people living with mental illness. You touched on, expansion of telehealth and telepsychiatry, and obviously you need the infrastructure in place so you can really take advantage of that technology and maybe then reach some areas that are historically underserved. And you also mentioned certified peer support specialists and peer-run respite services, which are areas where we believe we can truly grow the mental health workforce, have people supporting those living with the mental illness that have lived experience, can help others navigate their situations effectively. Are there other incentives you think the state can put in place, or other actions the state can take to help us grow the mental health workforce? Obviously, shortages in healthcare and mental health are both either already happening or could be happening soon. So other thoughts on that?
Well, I would say this: it's an extremely serious situation, and here's the issue. So I've had the ability to look at this from a couple of different angles, and so with the racial disparities task force that we're on, one of the things that the group has identified is that we need more minority teachers in the classroom. Okay, so if you take a look, and we've done some research on this, and had a group that's done research provide us with some answers. It's not as easy as loan. I mean, first thing I'll normally get is, how about loan forgiveness? And what I normally tell people is, okay, I'll give you the 20 careers that all want loan forgiveness, whether it be doctors, dentists, teachers, mental health professionals. Does it work? In some cases, possibly. I know we've gotten requests to take a look at, raising pay for certain, like in-home health service providers and others that the state funds, which I know we'll take a close look at that as well, because but here's something that I was really struck with. Is one of my colleagues, Representative Magnifici, is a registered nurse, and we were talking about labor shortages in a number of different areas. And so we were talking about, how do we provide, we have a shortage of workers that care for the elderly. Okay. And so we were in a discussion with this, and her point to me was, you can put all the money or incentives you want in it, but who would you rather have taking care of you at that period of time, or your family? Someone that's there for the money, or someone that's there that does the work because that's what they feel their calling is. Now, if she's a registered nurse and, you know, she has the same outlook there. It's, yeah, you can put incentives in, but we have to start finding a way to get people interested in these careers, especially our younger generation, at an earlier age. I hear people say, well, we have to open up, like the Racine Unified School District has academies of Racine. One of the things that I kind of bit my tongue in another meeting with was they were talking about, well, all of our stuff says college or career ready, and we preach that in the academies, and I'm like, okay, you're about 8 years too late, and I believe you have to drive down the exposure to different facets of our K through 12 education to show these careers, to tap people that want to do this work so that they start thinking about it at an earlier age, and don't don't look at just what's my compensation or whatever, but can see that you can really be fulfilled by the type of work that you can do. So if I had a silver bullet to do that, we'd have legislation on the table right now. So we're still searching. If someone has an idea, we're more than willing. We look at some of the programs that maybe use alternative resources and look at ways to, effectively use our if we have to use licensing or how do we invest in training. The question came up, to make that point another way, the question came up about daycare. And so we talk about, funding things for daycare. We talk about giving people money to go to daycare, but the conversation is slightly starting to shift now as to, doesn't do me any good if I send you to a daycare. If it's not a quality daycare, it doesn't help the child at all. So we have to find ways to get more of our young people involved. We have to find ways to look at people 25 and older. It's another thing that our technical colleges are focusing on. There are a lot of people that would like to join the workforce. We have plenty of jobs that don't feel they have the skill. Well, how do we get them enrolled in programs that can get them certified? And then when we look at incentives, we try to say, how does everybody have some part of that? So that, does the employer have a piece? If the state's going to provide us incentive, do we have it? And then how does the person that wants to take advantage of it have some part in the game? But we're open to any and all ideas. The other part is that I look to try to attend everything I can to promote. These are, we look at, that's why I say committee work is so important. We look at some of these issues and get testimony and have people in the education committee, K through 12, talking to some of the deans of education and so on. But one of the things that I guess I'll let people know the real catch-22, and I use the minority teacher concept because one of the issues that they brought up is to say we can't get more minority teachers into the pipeline because if they have a bad experience in their K through 12 education, they may not want to go into teaching. So if you sit and look logically, some of our struggling districts are here in the area where we have the biggest minority populations. So if those kids aren't getting an experience currently in K through 12, how do you expect them to move on to some of those careers? So I think there's a huge amount of challenges. If we can be part of a solution, I think we have to take steps to get there. And then many times what you find in state government is that you set a foundation, see if something works, and then continue to make investments.
Very good. Let's switch to another topic, the new 988 National Mental Health Emergency Hotline, which will become effective in 2022. Of course, it's really a hotline geared specifically toward people experiencing a mental health crisis or a suicide situation. But I'm wondering if there's been discussion, at least from your perspective in the legislature, about putting together a state plan to fully implement the new 9/8 system in Wisconsin, and to fully realize the benefits of it in terms of connecting that resource to other crisis type services, et cetera.
Okay, so the answer is yes. And so as you mentioned, it's a federal program. So as we all know, we have to wait for certain guidance out of the federal government. We anticipate that and Wisconsin has received a grant that'll serve to cover implementation costs, and we expect that by probably the end of August, early September of this year, there should be an implementation plan drafted. Okay, but one interesting note is that any state funding for the implementation was not included in the DHS budget for the request for the current year. So I don't know if that's a telling sign that they believe that that the federal grant will cover everything, but I anticipate they'll have some type of plan. I've got our initial belief is that sometime around August or September of this year. So we'll see if they meet that time frame or not. But I certainly wouldn't see why we wouldn't want to get it up and running as quickly as possible, because we are going to need this as we move forward into the next year and beyond. I just think we're once people start coming out a little bit more, I think you're going to really start to see the impact of I continue to read about the impacts of having been shuttered in, so some of the people, the anxiety they feel over what this virus and some of the presentation has done, I'm a big believer in getting kids back in school in person, and I just am really concerned that those that were struggling before are going to be deeper, and you're going to find one of the most telling points in our committee hearing last year with the WIAA brought up a survey they do. These are student athletes. Okay, so in 2019 they take this in March. 34% of the kids in the survey responded that they had felt some kind of anxiety or could be subject to depression. When they took that survey in 2020 in March, and this is at the early stages of when this virus first came out, and the lockdowns and a number of other things that occurred, that number doubled to almost 68%. Okay, so now we're talking about most people think, well, you're a student athlete, you've got all kinds of good things going for you, but to see an increase like that, can you imagine how that's going to be in some of the districts we have now that haven't been in person for over a year?
Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on some of the other crisis services in Wisconsin? That there's been discussion, there was discussion in the last legislative session, and I believe there's also a proposal in the governor's budget regarding establishing more like regional crisis stabilization centers, so we can bring some of these services closer to where people need them, and also some programs to encourage more mobile co-responder approaches to crisis situations, so law enforcement can focus on true law enforcement responsibilities, and mental health or social services professionals can be available to address other issues that may arise in some crisis situations. What are your kind of thoughts on where that issue stands in Wisconsin now? What's the likelihood of being able to make these services more robust and widely available over the next few years?
It could be that we maybe will do something in a pilot approach. And maybe you'll see some things that will be invested in the second year of so as you know, our budget covers 2 years. So it will start July 1st of 2021, and the first year will end in June of 2022. You may see, as we start figuring out where federal money is going to go, what we're going to be able to do, you may see that there will be maybe heavier investments in certain programs once we get to the second year, to let some state money take over and expand some of the things that we have. So some of us may advocate for that as we go through the budget cycle. I have written with the Sheriff's Department, have conversation with Sheriff Smelling on a regular basis. I also, Chief Bosch in Caledonia, and I'm actually going to do ride along in Milwaukee as well. One of the heads of the Milwaukee Police Association is in my district and has offered to have me come out. And I think those are all important because I believe law enforcement does want more ways to bring services in. But when you sit down and you talk reality, I think we have to really figure out where the best line is for that. So, for example, we have colleagues here. I have a number of colleagues that were in rural law enforcement, so we talk quite a bit about what happens. And so some of the things that come to the forefront that we would like to see addressed is the fact that yes, you're gonna need some way to work through some situations that require mental health professional as well as law enforcement. And so one of the things that that we talk about is like when they talk about removing a child from a family home. The first call is to law enforcement to bring someone from the DCF or someone else in place to actually perform the service. And I know when I talk to the sheriff, he's like that we have no problem. We would like to be able to have a number of these people ready to work with. The other thing that I know that they would like to see addressed is the fact that when they do have someone, and I don't want to reference a section number because I know I'll get it wrong, but when they do arrest someone that has mental issues, mental health issues, they have to take them to one of the facilities that, for us, it's a 2-hour trip. For some of my colleagues that are in the northwest part of the state, it's a 4-hour trip. Round trip is 8 hours for these officers. And I know the sheriff and I have talked about, we really need to find a way to transport those people, not with law enforcement, but with some type of medium that is more aligned to the service that they need until we find a way to expand the services to closer regions, because two things happen. It's not good for somebody that's having issues to be cuffed in the back of a squad car for 2 hours, and the stress it puts on the officer. I would recommend, and he will have anyone from the community come out. If you don't think that what some of these officers go through, the things they see, the things they deal with, and how it affects them, I mean, we have to make sure that to keep the best and the brightest in law enforcement, we've got to make sure that they have resources as well, so that they're not succumbing to the same things that all of us have. And so so how do we get that in the budget, and where do we put it? Those are the things that we start to talk about and advocate for. And so we may look at programs. We may look at, do we do a pilot in some cases to see if something works, and then if it works, we can expand it. But I know those are issues that we're talking about now. If telehealth is so use telehealth as an example. it has really provided some good value and some good coverage. So why wouldn't we want to look at, something like, mobile co-responder, some kind of expansion? But when we look at it, we would like to see it across a bigger swath of the state than just, let's say, in one county or in one spot, unless you're going to do a small pilot program. But sometimes what we find is that there are certain resources that are devoted to certain areas of our state. We've got to make sure that the coverage expands a little bit more and that we're setting a better foundation. So I know those are the things we're talking about with a number of these different issues because, and so if those of you that are online wonder where I get some of my information, it's the part that you don't see when I'm not online. And that's, we do quite a bit of research here. We've got quite a bit of support. And so the questions I know that you provided in the subject areas that we actually addressed with Mark Bourne, that's the head of the Joint Finance Committee, that will really take a key part in the budget. So we're very close with a number of things that we do. And so these are all things that we're talking about, and we will continue to talk about over the next month as to how do we work with the budget to advocate for them.
Is another area under discussion, the treatment alternatives and diversion programming. I know there's been positive feedback on some of those initiatives from some counties in the state. Is there still continued support for that type of approach going forward?
That's interesting you should say that, because we were just discussing that yesterday morning. And so if you, to give people a little bit of understanding of how we approach some of the things in the budget, we'll get together collectively, all 61 of us that are on my side of the aisle, and we will go through all the different areas in the budget at some degree. We also have smaller groups that get together that talk about subjects in more detail. But we were talking about the approach to the TAD program. And so what happens is that we will normally discuss and ask, does anyone have a problem with it? Or, is this something that you would like to see? Do you want to see it expanded? And that's how we start to get a framework for, where are we going to start? Do we all agree we need to put some resources in it? And one of the things that was mentioned is, if you really take a look at the data really does support making more of an investment, because it's having some really good results. Now, I asked another question because in Racine County, I've been able to attend the Veterans Court that we have, and that has produced some really good results as well. And so we're going to take a look and see if that's included under that, or if that's a separate, or if that's not even something that the state funds, if that's just a county program that we have. But those alternatives, yes, we are very tuned into that we need to have a wider net with more alternatives to address the issues, so that that we can make sure that the health of the state continues to be addressed.
Kind of shifting back to budget issues, Medicaid funding, acceptance of federal funds for Medicaid. It's been a discussed and debated issue in Wisconsin for a number of years. What is the status of that now from your perspective, in terms of the so-called federal expansion, or do you think there are other approaches that would achieve similar results? I mean, what's your perspective on that issue?
Well, I think it's like anything that comes from the feds, even the money that you see now, nothing comes free. Okay. And so it's been debated, but the hard part is debating it down into the details, because I think if you asked anyone, if you went outside right now and said, would you take $1,000? Most people would say, sure, I'll take it. Well, it's the same thing as looking at this. what you have to get into is into the details of how accepting certain funds works, what strings are tied to it, and then what happens if the federal government doesn't fund the programs. And I know they're putting in a lot of enhancers and so on through some of the federal legislation that's coming through now. And, in some cases, expanding, so it's like again, a one-time kickback from the federal government. And in some way, the approach that we take is that we look to find a way to have us in Wisconsin be viable enough to fund these programs without relying on the federal government and expanding programs. Because in many cases, what happens is you take able-bodied adults, you put them on assistance, you take them off of the private sector providers and so on, and now it increases everybody's rates. There are states that are starting to question, their taking of federal money. But I know it's a hot topic because everybody believes you should just take the money, and there's a lot of good you could do with it. The problem comes into, especially now with the feds printing much more money, what happens if you start scaling it back? Then we've got to find a way to deal with it in our own budget. And I will emphasize, we don't have an access problem here in the state, because there are federal programs. There's our Badger Care program here in the state. Everybody should have access to coverage. A lot of things you have to look at is what's required in some of the ways when you accept funds as to what states started with in their coverage programs and so on. And it really gets down deep into some technical details, but I think we'll continue to take a very, very conservative and cautious approach to just accepting funds and expanding different programs where we would have to, in the end, fund them.
With respect to Medicaid, there are some who contend that some of the match amounts from Medicaid for certain services in Wisconsin, especially like outpatient treatment, psychosocial rehab benefits, are much lower than other similar states. I don't know if you've heard that type of feedback previously. Is that something that the legislature may be addressing, irrespective of the federal expansion issue, or are those all related?
Yeah, Medicaid is kind of a complicated subject, and reimbursement rates and so on. We spend a lot of time taking a look at, we supported certain reimbursement rates with the hospitals and so on. It's trying to kind of capture it in a way that you can explain, how to navigate some of it. You have to sit down and for example, talk to different providers and so on of services, because in some cases, just merely increasing a match isn't exactly where it needs to be. And so we look at the dish payments that we did with hospitals. I know there's a desire to continue to do those as well. And then to look at other programs that we have that can provide services. So for example, there's a pilot program in Racine County called iDental, where we've, that I've visited. They're doing an excellent job with providing dental services, and especially I think they service at least 70% of people that are on Medicare. I think it's Medicaid, and I get the two mixed up a lot, and that's why I'm really cautious in this area. And if you see some of the things that we take a look at to prepare for a discussion, it's just navigating through some of that, and it's all related into how we fund certain services that go on. We'll continue to discuss and address it in the budget. Will we raise levels and so on? We'll probably have a better understanding of that probably more towards the middle to the end of this month as we get into further discussions.
Are the reimbursement rates, are those actually established by the state legislature? Or what is the mechanism for doing that? Or is that other state agencies that manage that, or is it a combination? Or
Yeah, there's a whole section in the budget that we look at. I believe it's called Managed Care, MC, and there are different reimbursement rates, and we set a number of those at the state level, and then for lack of a better term, I believe there are in some cases federal matches and so on, and so you've got to kind of navigate through that entire deal to look at what the state responsibilities are, and then what the maybe what the match of the feds or how some of those programs work. And so if you take a look at some of the federal legislation that comes through, what mainly gets in the headlines is, well, the feds will give you an extra 20% match, and we'll take a look at, well, for how long, what else is in there. I mean, let's face it, what was it, the American Rescue Plan or one of the acts that came out was 6,000 pages. So it takes at least a few months and different things to look at, but we do research what goes on in other states. We belong to the National Council of State Legislatures. They do a lot of research to show us what's going on with other states. We do try to take and break that down to are you looking at the same items? Are you looking at the same programs? What's different? And that usually gets, as we go through the budget process, when we start to address a topic, we'll get more direct information further in the weeds, and we can do some more research. If and I put this out there, we get questions all the time from constituents, and we have different support agencies that we look at. We don't have any. Well, so the two people that run my life here that do a really good job in helping this office be successful aren't here now, so they'd be rolling their eyes if I said, just send us the questions and we'll start answering that, because they hate to send me out into the community, because I always come back, as they say, with more work for us to do. So, but that's what we're here for. They do really well. I'll give you an example. One of the things, just as a kind of with a little levity, one of the things that some of my friends have sent in is to say, well, when are we going to get a sports gambling here in Wisconsin? And so we had we had legislative council take a look at, what are the parameters, and there's a whole constitutional issue with it, and the tribal gaming plays into this, and we can get it in a way where I can send you the answer to that question. And so we have just a standard response I'm sending to several of my friends that continue to contact me with that. But, and we do other things, so for example, during this time, there's a lot of difficult situations with families in our district. And we had some people that went into one of the facilities, old age facilities, and passed away there. And so we have ways where we can processes that we use to try to help people get answers. We had a lot of issues with people not being able to see their loved ones or to go in there's a number of facilities that work with people that have dementia, Alzheimer's, a number of other those things. And so when we got into the heart of this, they stopped allowing people in. And so we can contact our agencies here. They have specific people that we work with, and we can do things like request that they, do a follow-up on issues that we have. Unemployment was a big one with us as well. And so that's why I encourage people that are in our district, if you've got questions and so on, we see every email. We listen to every voicemail that's left. We take every conversation. We may not agree on certain things, but we do look to take that feedback in when we have these discussions in the budget area. So.
Very good. Thank you. Nicole, do we have any other questions in the chat?
I don't have anything right now, no. So those that are watching, again, please feel free to submit any questions you have into the chat box. And we can ask Representative Wittke those questions.
Representative Wittke, I'll ask you, as we always ask legislators that we meet with, what are the most effective ways for your constituents to contact you and make an impact? Now that you're in the second term, what works and what doesn't work?
So I know that I started last November telling people that if you have an issue, bring it to us as early as possible. And we do. We'll research it. We'll find out if there's certain legislation out there. So, for example, one of the things that we looked at, before I got on tonight was, so we're starting to cycle through legislation that we had last year that we passed. So there's a couple of things. There were a couple of bills that are out there, AB 193, which has grants for preventing suicide by firearm. There's AB 210 that has grants for suicide prevention. So we've co-sponsored those two bills. We'll be supporting those as they get to the floor. But there's two of the best ways to contact us are by calling our number direct. Our office is open 24 hours, so the voicemail system will take it, and then send us an email. And it's not hard to find me. Everything we do is online. You can just Google Wisconsin Legislature. It'll take you to the homepage. You can go right to and look up by name, and then it'll give you. We have a toll-free number here, and then we have our email as well. Or you can send. Some people prefer to send us a letter, and then So the process that we'll normally take is that if you have something you want to discuss with us, that we'll make an attempt to try to schedule a time where we can discuss things in more detail. If you give us an idea of what you want to discuss, if you have a specific question, and so those are the two best ways to get to us. And I will caution people. Some people get very frustrated because they feel if Terry or Mary in my office answer the phone, they think that that's just kind of like a gatekeeper, and that I don't see or hear any of the things. My office here, the door is right out. They're right outside the door that I've got to this office I'm in, and so we discuss everything, and they'll group subject matter that will sit down. Do we respond by email? Do we make some calls? But if you talk to them, it's like talking to me, because you have to understand that when I sit in a 5.5-hour education committee meeting, you may not get me for a day or two, and then we spend at least 2 days where we make appointments in the district, getting to know the things that are out there. So those are the two best ways to get to us. And I know I've gotten emails that people have said, well, I didn't get a response right away. And some cases it may take us a little bit, but we try to get back to everyone that's got questions. And I will say this, you can be as harsh as you'd like. That's we're used to that. We don't agree with everyone, and I'll sort through that. That's fine. But most people should just probably try to take the understanding of how would you like to be treated, and if you you have something that is constructive to talk about, it probably goes a little further than if you list the number of names that you would like to tag. To me, that's all well and good. But those are some of the things that we work through. I represent everybody in my district. We all have differing views. And so if I can't sit and listen to someone that has a different view, that's not going to help. So we talk about this a lot. I've got everyone in my district, but I also have 5.8, which I believe now is the right number, is about 5.8 million people in the state that we represent as well. And so we have to find out what's right for the state. There are things that I believe in. I'm a fiscal conservative. I believe in investing resources so that we get a return. But one of the interesting parts about doing this job is that most people don't understand half of how this process works here. And it's not as quick as people might think. And it's certainly not nearly like what the headlines provide to you. I always tell people to go a little bit deeper. So anything else I can, more than glad to answer any questions you got.
So I have
Great insights.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Someone asked what tag a number of names means. Oh.
Sorry. Let's just say that, we get some interesting correspondence. Okay. Not necessarily using the God-given name I have.
And we do not use any of these approaches as
No.
advocates. So
no. And so you did mention something in here, that I think we talk about a lot, and that is how do we continue to remove the stigma around a number of different things. And I truly believe that you have to make the effort. Every single one of us has to make an effort to try to understand where someone else comes from, and then help them to understand that there are people out here to help, and that you aren't any less of a person if you have issues that you're dealing with that you can't work with. I'd rather see someone go for help, and if they call our office, we will try to find you the right avenue or the right thing. We've worked with a number of different people on that as well. And so that's another thing that I believe in as well.
it's a very important message, and obviously thought leaders like state legislators can influence, public opinions on these types of issues. So we appreciate you sharing that sentiment with us. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us this evening? You've been very generous with your time, which we greatly appreciate. Any summary thoughts?
I guess the one thing that I'll say, the one thing that I've learned here is that we were talking about some of that today as well. You'd like to see things done faster. You'd like to see things done all at once, and it doesn't happen necessarily that way. And one of the things I tell people is that, so there's 3 different facets to what we do, plus a 4th that comes into play a little bit later on. And so I can pass a bill in the assembly that I'm really proud of, but I've got to get it through the Senate, and it may not come out of the Senate looking like I've had it. And so once it then goes to the governor's desk, it'll either be accepted or not. And that's a long, I happened to work through a tax bill that we got done early this section that took over 2 years. And then now, if you look at the rules process with the agencies that we have, and that's why I tell people that there's critical things that are done in our committee hearings and so on. And that's why watch how some, people that are elected, watch how they conduct themselves in a committee hearing, what they're after, because it tells a lot, because we get a lot done in some of those areas. And in the discussions that we have, you'd be surprised how much you can get done just by getting a concept across. We were talking today in one of the meetings that we had, and you're asked your opinion. What do you think we should be investing in? And I said, I think we've got to invest in some of these mental health issues and start to lay the foundation, because it's going to take up a greater share of what we're going to do as we move forward. And so I would, like I said, if people have follow-up questions, don't be afraid to send us. If you guys got other things you'd like to talk to us about, you think that there's some things in the budget we have to. I sat through one of the JFC sessions out at Whitewater. We sit through and listen to what people have to say, and then take a look at how are we going to address certain things in the budget. So, but yeah, and all I can say is support your local. I think I want to make this clear. Support the local organization, because you don't realize how much good they do until you actually go out somewhere. And I will always tell the story. I went with Nicole to one of the sessions she did at a local school. And of course, I was a little bit more frustrated because we were sitting in a health class. And if anybody sat in a health class, it's done by the phy ed teacher, and it's probably like once or twice a week. And I was like, ninth grade, a lot of kids with their heads down, don't understand the impact that we have. But she was able to show me that there was one person there that needed their help. And that really had an impact on me, because the one person, she was there to actually help. And it really had an impact on me. That's all I'll say.
Thank you. I know
Thank you, and thank you.
remember that day, and that happens more frequently than we probably would all like to think. And so I was glad that you were there to get to witness that and see that the programming that we offer really is impactful and has a place in our community.
It certainly does. And I will say, because I normally believe in that you have to show a greater spread. But when you think about something as serious as that, you always go back and think about your own family and so on. So if it was my daughter, if it was my friend's daughter, wouldn't I want just that one person? And it takes groups like this to go in, because you can't fund everything and we don't have enough resources. And that's why if there are people on this line that want to get involved, I would tell you to sign up. Or as what we do a lot, when you're in my position, you're always willing to have people write checks. And I'm sure this organization would be the same. So I really appreciate what they do. And so we've really tried to make a concentrated effort to try to be at any time that you have events or so on. We're more than glad to promote that and advocate for the causes that you have. So hopefully we'll deliver a lot of these things in the budget. If there's things that people want us to take a closer look at on the mental health side and they have ideas, please just send them to our office, and I'll be more than glad to follow up in another, end of the month or into early June to let you know how far some of these things have gotten, if you want to have that follow up. And now that everybody is doing these meetings virtually, I guess we have to use the advantage to get the message through. So, and I'll bring up one last thing, because NAMI's not the only organization in the county. So I get questions all the time about, how could we do more and things like that. One of the things I'll tell you is that I have frequent calls with the Ascension Group, which is a primary healthcare provider in the district right now, and with Aurora as well. And so, I've been on calls that have had, I normally am on with the CEO, and then I've had on the head of nursing and so on. And so we try to get a well-rounded picture of what we're trying to address. And so, we really do try to understand and where our things will have most impact. So I've taken a lot more time than you wanted. So I
Oh,
Well, we appreciate you being so generous with your time and answering many complex questions and sharing your thoughts. And we greatly appreciate the ongoing dialogue. And Nicole, I'll turn it back to you so you can wrap things up for us.
all right. Thank you, Representative Wittke. We always appreciate you speaking with us and doing these panels with us. It's a great opportunity for us to get to communicate with you and express some of our community concerns and needs. I want to thank everybody who was able to attend tonight. And we did end up doing Facebook Live on this. So thank you to everyone on Facebook too that was able to attend. If you want more information on any of these or other subjects, please visit NAMI's website, and we have a plethora of videos for you to take a peek at, and other information and resources that are available. So with that, I guess good night, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you again.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good
Good night.
night.